Welcome to episode 1 of the PsiloPod. This podcast is brought to you by Psilo Health, where we strive to empower individuals and communities through education, legislation, and integration of psilocybin-supported experiences. We promote sustainable, peer-led, community-centered healing initiatives with equitable access at the forefront. All right, so the PsiloPod elevates voices of individuals doing unique and valuable work in the entheogenic space. We strive to spotlight grassroots projects, present groundbreaking work, and broadcast leaders who are driving community-centered psychedelic healing. Listeners will hear personal stories of how people began their work and what drives them to create new paradigms today. You'll also hear deeply insightful fireside chats on why people are serving the communities that they are in, and how we can all do a better job of promoting equitable access to consciousness-expanding activities and substances. Psilo Health also recently released our Psilocybin Peer Support Program, also known as our PPS program, with 9 units of comprehensive training that you can take for free to learn how to become a psilocybin peer supporter. So if you are curious and you are not a clinician or a therapist of any sort, but you would like to understand how to support your friends, your family, your peers in psychedelic and expanded states of consciousness, all of that information and education can be found on our website, psilohealth.co/PPS. And again, it's free. All of the content is there for you to see. And if you would like a certification at the end of it, then we do ask that you take a test, and there is a certification fee. But all of it is there for you to enjoy and hopefully support communities for years to come. We would love to have you. So without further ado, here is episode number 1. All right, episode 1 of PsiloPod. We're super excited to kick this off with an absolutely incredible guest. We have Jahan Khamsezadeh joining us. Jahan, how's it going?
It's going really good, Hannah. I'm so grateful to be here.
Awesome. We're super, super lucky to have you. I have all kinds of questions lined up for you today, but we'll see where the flow and, the next few minutes or hour takes us. Before we kick off, I wanted to introduce you really quick to those who may not be so familiar with your work. Jahan, Ph.D., completed his dissertation on psychedelics in the Philosophy, Cosmology, and Consciousness program at the California Institute of Integral Studies, CIIS. His book, The Psilocybin Connection, Psychedelics, the Transformation of Consciousness, and the Evolution of the Planet, an Integral Approach, was published by North Atlantic Books and distributed spring of 2022 by Penguin Random House. He earned his master's in Consciousness and Transformative Studies from John F. K. University and his bachelor's from the University of Arizona, with a major in philosophy and minors in physics, psychology, and mathematics. Aside from academic work, he has undergone several major trainings, including graduating from the Hakomi somatic-psychotherapy program and training for years with the Mazatec mushroom tradition. He assisted the Psychedelic-Assisted psychotherapy certificate training at CIIS for 2 years and mentored at the Center for Consciousness Medicine. He is currently a content advisor for the Synthesis Psychedelic Guide training and works as a facilitator for legal psilocybin mushroom retreats in Jamaica with Atman Retreats. Jahan, that's quite the list of credentials.
Yeah, thank you for reading it all out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, where are you at in life today? Like, your book was just published, Thanksgiving was yesterday. Like, what's going on for you right now?
I guess on a personal level, for the forefront is connections and community, even using mycelium as a metaphor. I think we're here to kind of branch out and create deep connections. I think the reason the universe split off from, can say this one being into all of us, or why there's 8 billion humans on the planet, is connection. And for so much of the last years, I had to do a lot of deep internal work and go through a lot of trainings to get the book out, which was like 5 years of writing, a master's and a doctor's back to back was a lot. All the trainings was a lot. And so now that I feel I completed like this major stage of all this work I had to do, and now the book is out, it felt like I was in labor for 5 years, like writing it and it's released. I've been taking some space for the other areas of my life. So working out every morning, going to amazing retreats, festivals, trainings. And then I've been lucky and grateful enough to be on, one or two podcasts a week since March.
Wow,
So it's
that's
nice to
awesome.
flow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good flow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Thanksgiving just passed. What does your
Mhm.
holiday time look like? I'm curious.
Yeah, totally. So yesterday I was with some family. I grew up with only my nuclear family in the United States because my dad came from Iran, my mom from Mexico. And a few years ago, some family members, my dad's brother and his two of his brothers and his children moved to Tucson, Arizona. And coincidentally, they happened to move to the Bay Area a few months ago. So after not having family around, there's some here. So I had dinner with them. Tonight, I'm having a kind of get together with the ISTA community, the International School of Temple Arts, kind of focusing on sexuality, shamanism, deep spirituality. Then Sunday is dinner and playing with the ecstatic dance community. I love dance. So like talent show, DJs.
That's awesome. Talent shows and DJs. What more can you ask for? I recently started exploring the ISTA community a little bit more. There's a lot of burners that are part of the ISTA community. And I think that it is so fascinating. So I'm curious, how did you get introduced to that community? What led you to dive in more?
No, I love the question. I'm really excited that it's pulling your attention. I had heard about it for I think the last 2 or 3 years, and as part of my personality, as I mentioned, I'm kind of in training after training. I think we're here primarily to love, and after that is learning, and it's where I put a lot of my resources and attention and time. And there's so many ways to learn, including relationally and experientially. After years of sitting in classrooms and just taking notes and reading, and I think there's an amazing intersection between shamanism and sexuality that not a lot of people have been doing work on. And so I've definitely found psychedelics to be the most transformative method of growth and healing. And after that, I'd actually put sexuality. And so they created this incredible container for 6 nights. I think a very legitimate mystery school. Like you never know what's going to happen until you show up to that class. They don't tell you the curriculum, the schedule, the exercises. You have to keep unfolding and trusting. And they do really good to bring people to deep altered states without the use of substances, just deep cathartic, relational exercises that get to the core of identity, the core of relationships, letting out shame, and just coming into more freedom and actualization.
Wow, that sounds amazing
Yeah,
and almost
yeah,
completely opposite, so to speak, from regular school, university curriculum where it's super structured. Day one, you arrive, you have your syllabus of everything you're going to do for the next 6 months or so. So I can see how that can be really appealing after so much rigorous study.
absolutely. And it is rigorous in the sense that it starts at 7:15 in the morning and goes to like 10 p.m. at night.
Oh my
And it's
gosh.
full for like 7 days, and you can't be late. You can't miss class. So it's very, and because they really believe in what they have to share, and they have so much to share. They want to make sure you get your money's worth and get the most out of it. So but it's the different way of bringing material. It's like all the learn, and we just never got to so far in life. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. That sounds super releasing. I
Yeah.
love that. Now, a lot of the
Yeah.
listeners that may be tuning in don't know a little bit about your background. And I think it's a beautiful story that if you're open to sharing, I
Yeah.
could personally listen to over and over again with how you got introduced to psilocybin and started down this journey that has been yours for what I believe is the last 20 years since that initial
Right.
experience. Would you mind diving into
Yeah.
that a little bit?
Yeah. No, thanks for asking. By the age of 15, I was suicidal, depressed, and atheist. It's like as if life had been this dark tunnel, but you never really saw light. So you just thought it was going to dark tunnel forever. And then it was about a month after graduating high school. I was on the way to see my favorite band, Tool, play a concert, see them for the first time. And somebody I just met gave me psilocybin mushrooms. I got stoked to take it. I thought it was going to be a really amazing day. It turned out to be the most significant day of my life so far. I don't think there's a day that's gone by that I haven't contemplated what happened because it was so transformative. Leading up to this, I had been walking for about 7 months, hours a day, trying to figure out the purpose of my life. When you're in pain, you're like in this deep existential inquiry, like, why the fuck are we here? What is humanity? How
Totally.
did we evolve? Totally. And so I came in with a lot of questions and openness. And then as the mushrooms began to kick in, I had this experience that I'm about to die, which is very scary. And I was in that for like 15 minutes, but I was so curious because of all this inquiry. I'm like, well, what happens if I just let go? And once I really surrendered, it felt as if my consciousness expanded to take up the whole stadium.
Mm.
I felt I was eternal, and it was like a sensation in my being that was familiar. Felt like every cell in my body was just orgasming with love. And this voice arose in my consciousness that felt very familiar and not my own. And it was like, Jahan. And it felt like the recognition, this is God, which I thought it was impossible. And I asked, is this real? And my response, it said yes. And I just started bawling. And then I was just crying tears for 90 minutes. And it felt like you rubbed like a genie bottle and this being came out, and this being asked, like, what do you want? And I was frozen. I'm like, nobody's asked me that before, and since then I'm like, most people don't really know what they want. We don't really, and it directs so much of our lives. And so I decided to ask, what are we? And I saw light come out of the ground and fill every body in the arena. And it was kind of telling me that we are love and light, and they're the same things. And the most important thing in life is love by far. Miles after that is learning, and everything else is so insignificant compared to these values. You won't have to worry about the complexity in the rest of my life. And so it was monumental. It really showed me that we're so deeply interconnected, that we're all safe, that this is already heaven. It's like, it's only our perception that keeps us away. We're not, if we all treated it as such and each other as such, we'd be living that way. But it's our feelings and perception of fragmentation that keeps us in anxiety, depression, despair, competition, ultimately just in a deep state of pain. So that moment, everything changed overnight, in the sense of, it was like, for, I don't know, maybe a decade, flows of synchronicities, just really kind of nailing it home how interconnected our internal and external world is, and I've had hundreds of journeys since, but nothing was as transformative, I feel like, is the first time, like, the veil falls and you're like, wow, there's so much more to this world than I had ever believed.
That's incredible. I feel like I take a new nugget away every time I listen to you tell that. And I really appreciate the perspective of, first is love, and then miles after that is learning. I think I resonate with that more and more on a cellular level every day. And it's just like, even in the anger, the pain, the sadness, if you just surrender to love, it's like there's beautiful opportunities of expansion, psychedelic state or not.
Yeah, no, I just got chills hearing that. It's the only way to heal, to grow. And, with this experience came this huge recognition that love is so intelligent. It is the compass. It is the right movement always, because that's what the universe is wanting. And every time we put some other value, some either survival value or selfishness or even learning, because it's easy to get stuck on just wanting to learn, we're really losing like the golden nugget of this moment. And so I love that speaks to you so much.
How has that experience changed for you over the course of 20 years? Like, has it kind of been a 20-year long integration process? Does it continue to transform for you?
Yeah. It's, I mean, one, I'm surprised by that by itself, how it's still there every day. But there was about 7 years where I probably thought about it hours a day. And so in that way, there's ripples and it was still changing me. And during those 7 years, I also was in a situation where I couldn't really talk about it. This is 2002, Tucson, Arizona. Culture was so different. There wasn't this widespread recognition of psychedelics. It's like the high likelihood, if I share this with somebody, it'd be dismissed, dropped, or they think you're crazy. Right. And so I found a lot of my mirroring by reading, and in school, and keeping my trajectory. And this was more like this personal relationship I felt with God, which we all have, is just kind of making it conscious. That was deeply personal and internal. And it was moving to the Bay Area, where I found, large communities of psychedelics and people interested in consciousness, were like, that part of me got to move more to relationship with other people.
That's amazing. And I can totally resonate with the Bay Area, moving from being a native Coloradoan and then moving to the Bay Area and having like the mind opening conversations that happen in that place. It's kind of indescribable. I've never really had it like that anywhere else, even among travels. And I think that the fact that maybe like the Summer of Love was condensed in that area, and Hate Street, and it kind of stuck around, and I really appreciate that. So I miss it in Colorado a little bit. And I think that you have to work a
Mm,
little bit more hard to find it. It's here for sure, but not like it is in the Bay Area. That's a special place.
no, totally. I think, yeah, there's bubbles all over the world. This one just seems like the largest bubble.
Yeah,
That's
it
why
does.
I'm here. Yeah. And there, just for the listeners, there's a great documentary that just came out on psychedelics. I think just a few days ago. It's the History 101, and they have all these topics of history. And today I saw the one on psychedelics, and they did an amazing job. And they went deep into like the Summer of Love and so on, where 100,000 people came out to Haight-Ashbury to take LSD and be in Golden Gate Park. And the Bay Area has a huge history worth. There's a good book called What the Dormouse Said that shows how psychedelic culture really gave rise to the personal computer revolution. So
Wow.
much of this, yeah, right. We know Steve Jobs, but there's a lot of the people in the early beginning of the engineers that helped create the internet, create the personal computer, the interface, the mouse, all were participating in LSD experiments. There was 3 LSD research sites in Silicon Valley in the 1950s. So it's just like this area has been so rich with creativity, spirituality, politics, all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have A Really Good Day. Um, I'm
Oh
blanking
yeah,
on who wrote that right now.
Ayelet Waldman. Yeah,
Yes, amazing book on
yeah.
microdosing LSD and the benefits that it had
Yeah.
for her on being a parent and all things in life, I think is really, really neat.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thanks to James Fadiman's work, I think it was mostly since 2011 that he put it out. And, the documentary actually just went into a little bit too, because, there's a lot of, you could say, hard things that are possible that come up with taking adequate or larger doses of psychedelics. It could be trauma, people can dissociate. There's so many things, but all the difficulties really reduce when you come to a microdose level, and yet you still get a lot of the benefits. So I think it's a
Yeah,
beautiful way that it gets into integrate into culture, and us begin collectively to develop these relationships with psychedelics.
I agree. And that's actually something that I feel like once I tell people a little bit that I do a little bit of work in the psychedelic space, because I also have my corporate job. But once the cat's out of the bag and I start talking about that, people ask, I think the most common thing is, I want to start exploring the space. How do I know whether to just have a macro dose, full journey, or whether to start experimenting with microdoses first? And I think it really depends on the person, the situation, and what they want to get out of it, obviously. But what's your take on how people should assess that for themselves and how they should start exploring if they're curious?
Yeah. I think the ideal way won't be as accessible to most people, and that's with an experienced guide, or therapist, or community leader that's been doing psychedelic ceremonial work, somebody that's done it a lot themselves and then really knows how to hold space in an ethical and trustworthy way. Um, so much of the important quality is safety, right? And often, if there's an individual here that really knows this kind of ground of the being or experience, you feel even safer. There's a lot of stuff that can be very difficult if people start just doing macrodoses alone. You can get in states of panic, states where you believe you're dying, right? But you really think it's really true, and freak out and do maybe some things that might be harmful to yourself or others. Most of the times it goes really well, but that is a possibility. But a lot of people won't have access to find a really skilled professional. And I love what we've done with
Mhm.
Silo Health to create, the peer-to-peer sitting program. I think that makes things open source and very available to everybody, to create a deep level of safety. So definitely encourage that. And then microdosing there's almost zero harm.
Mhm.
I would have to sit there. Nothing would come to mind, of
Yeah.
like how this could be harmful in any way, shape, or form. So so much what we're working with is fear. It's the fear
Mhm.
that comes up in the journey that's difficult, right? And so this is a way people to titrate and work on the fear that comes up when they think about approaching psychedelics. Once they feel safe and comfortable here, it's like going on a date, getting comfortable with the person. After that, you can kind of go deeper with them. So I think microdosing is a great way to go.
Yeah, I think so too. I think if anything, like with most things in life, you build trust. You build trust with the substance or the person. You build trust with yourself. I think that was a big thing for me personally when I was microdosing is I was like, okay, I have done a couple journeys and now I'm going to start microdosing. How can I trust myself that what I'm doing is safe? And part of that was like I want to keep the plant in my life, but in a way that is safe and beneficial to me. And I think microdosing was kind of the bridge to that.
And I love that we're really bringing in trust. I feel it's one of the major qualities that are cultivated over the long term of psychedelic use. You're faced with so many things, whether deep emotions, archetypal content, so on. And you keep finding out at the end of all these difficult cathartic experiences or shadow work that you're still okay every time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you start to really develop a deep sense of trust in your mind, in your heart, in your being, in your body. And I think that sense of trust that we feel, especially when we're kind of feeling connected to everything, starts to really kind of grow and expand to there's trust in humanity, of the planet, evolution, God, the universe. And so much of our fear, a lot of people come in because, depression, anxiety, there's a deep sense of not belonging and not feeling safe. And the more we kind of trust, we kind of surrender, let go, we feel more open and okay with everything. We move out of survival mode, which keeps, our resources and keeps us in contraption. And trust is kind of a letting go and really feeling held either by yourself or the universe. So I think it's a deep underlying important quality of just having a good state of well-being is this deep sense of trust.
I agree. And you also mentioned the psilocybin peer support program with Silo Health, in which you recorded Unit 3, History of Trip Sitting, which is super comprehensive. I mean, you probably picked up, showed, referenced 8 to 10, maybe more books just out of your mind. I know I asked you for a script later so that we could translate it into closed captioning. And you were like, I did this all from my brain. I don't have a script. And I'm like, that's incredible. That is like the true mark of somebody that is an expert in this field, that you can just speak from the heart on that. So for those that are not familiar with the psilocybin peer support program, it's a 9-unit program aimed at educating individuals, peers like you, me, everyone, who don't have clinical and therapist backgrounds on how to support your friends, peers, family in psychedelic and expanded states of consciousness. So, Jahan, what do you like about the peer-to-peer model versus or in tandem with a guided experience? Because there's different levels of accessibility there that I think are bubbling up, especially as things become decriminalized.
Yeah, no, thanks. I feel something that we've done with Silo Health that it feels new, novel, and I think just really important is I feel like we've made it tremendously more accessible than anything else I've come across, right? Like I've never seen a comprehensive free online training. And I think the ability to get that level of education and awareness to be able to hold space is going to be one of the largest bottlenecks of us integrating psychedelics into culture, right? There's other people that are teaching cultivation, mushroom cultivation, because I feel that the two big things is access to somebody that's somewhat skilled or safe, and then access to the medicine itself. And there's a lot of people working, we have a friend, Seth Warner, he has a website, mycorrhizingfungi.com, and he has a beautiful, organized and filmed workshop on teaching people how to grow their own mushrooms. And then the other part is, how do we create the safety around this? And so, having worked and been a part of, I think, 5 different psychedelic trainings or gone through them, they can be really expensive and take a long time. And as many of us know, the people perhaps that have the most trauma in culture are those that are in the lower social economic ladder, right? And a lot of them are just minorities, and it's hard to see them to have access to a skilled professional anytime in the next 5 to 10 years, because it takes so long to train and it costs so much money to train.
It does.
I mean, so it's like they won't have, there's not enough trained people on top of that. It costs a lot of money to get to them. I've been working in Jamaica with Atman to at least create some legal accessibility. There's a lot of people that just won't do anything if it's illegal, so people go over there. But that also takes a lot of money to go to a different country, right? So how do we help the majority of the population that may have to wait 10, 20 years to even have this level of psychedelic healing in a safe container? And the best solution I think we can come up with is to help educate that population to begin to heal each other. And there's always going to be, specific cases of really deep trauma and PTSD that are still going to be best to be held by a professional.
I agree. I like that you brought in the lens of it's kind of a spectrum. It's what are you trying to get out of the experience? Maybe what is your history, mental history, health history, and that some of that is suited for a peer-to-peer experience, and some of that is suited for somebody that has a little bit more or a lot more training. And I personally hope we can get to a space where the licensed clinicians that can hold space for people that need a little bit more support is more equitable. And I think that was one of the big controversies in Proposition 122 here in Colorado, where I had the opportunity to kind of sit in on a lot of different talks, especially down in Denver. Went to the Emergence gathering, which was great. I felt like they had a really diverse speaker lineup who really supported either side. So Proposition 122, what's your view on it?
I haven't been enough to read all the details about it just because my life has been full here and
Hmm.
focusing on other areas of psychedelics. I think with every kind of law that passes, there's going to be little details that we're all not going to agree on,
Hmm.
And the way I do sit on things right now, I think as long as things are good enough, I feel the main things we need to shift is the stigma and perception of psychedelics in culture, right? And there's, as I mentioned, like there's gonna be like half the population that doesn't like to do things if it's illegal.
Right.
Like we see this with marijuana. As soon as marijuana went legal, I mean, grandparents are doing it, parents, everybody that just would never, because it's like a moral issue and a safety issue. It's illegal.
Hmm.
They're scared. And so I think the big thing we're trying to get over is just public education and awareness. And I think legality is maybe the most important part of that.
Hmm.
And laws can be refined. So if we wait around years to get the perfect law that's really focused, that's years that we've lost, that a lot of people were in deep pain. So I am for, like, let's move things forward, and then if we need to backtrack and spend a year refining the law, let's absolutely do that. It's like any relationship. It's like we're not gonna hit the mark every single time, but we can
Right.
repair, adjust, get to know each other and attune. So yeah, I'm curious to hear more about like living that you live there. What are the parts that you liked or didn't like about the law?
Yeah, I feel like my opinion on it continues to shift as I learn more. There's so many people that know so much more than me about the law. There's people that I got to talk to that helped write the law. And
Mm.
so my initial opinion on it was, woohoo, let's do this. Absolutely. This is great. And I think that was kind of like the rose colored glasses. We're decriminalizing plant medicine in Colorado. And I think that that was my approach for a really long time. I think as the voting date got closer, I started seeing some more organizations put out like no on Proposition 122. They were taking a pretty hard stance. And I thought to myself, like, wow, I haven't really even bothered to understand the other side. Let me do some digging. And I started having a ton of conversations. And the main thing that really stood out to me was that people were afraid that we were leaving out the community-centered model. There were going to be people left behind, people who were in need as much as anybody else, but who wouldn't be able to have the access. There would be, corporations coming in, putting a bunch of money into the system and kind of taking over. And I thought, okay, yeah, this sounds a lot like the marijuana industry. I was here when we legalized marijuana in Colorado. And then I started to have more conversations. I really believe that a lot of the people that wrote the law recognize and take a use case from the marijuana industry and say, we don't want it to look exactly like that. And
Mm-hmm.
they really, really care about that. And so my opinion has shifted over time. For a moment, I was going to sway no. I think ultimately I reside where you reside, which is like, it's progress. If we need to tweak things, let's do it. But especially in the realm of palliative care, end of life, those people deserve, I think, if they have a terminal illness, to have the opportunity to access something that gives them peace at the end of life. I struggled with death anxiety myself, and I did not have a terminal illness, so I can't even imagine. But I think that it's really important for those people to be able to heal in the way that they need to before their soul moves on. So that's where I end with that, is I'm not here to make a decision
Yeah.
on the fact that somebody can't take something. I want them
Yeah.
to have that option.
Because I mean, I love your share right now. Maybe for the audience to hear, how did it help you with the, end of life anxiety, like the dying and the fear? Because it's so rampant. And so I'm curious,
Yeah.
what was the experience like? What happened that allowed you to feel more free and more open, trust, like,
Yeah. So from when I was like 13, I started having this fear of death. I didn't know where it was coming from. I was afraid of dying. I was afraid of my parents dying. It was this constant fear where I just thought that any minute they would be gone. And for a while, it kept me from living my fullest life, leaving the house. It morphed into things like I would stop going to class in college, kinds of things. And I worked with a therapist for quite a few years, like 7 years, with EMDR, IFS, parts work, and nothing was really working. It just seemed to be getting worse, to the point where it manifested that I couldn't even get on airplanes. So I would book a flight, I'd be at the airport, and I would just sit there and watch everybody board the plane, and I wouldn't get on. And then I'd turn around and go home. So it ended up being to the point where I couldn't really travel, which is what I love to do in life. So I had a really, really deeply amazing, personal, still the best day of my life to this point, a macrodose psilocybin experience with a guide, and it changed everything. I came out of that journey in complete love with myself and the universe. It was the best day of my life. And I remember in the immediate integration session, the guide said, "How is your death anxiety right now? What do you think about dying?" And I remember just saying, "It's okay. I don't have death anxiety anymore. I'm not afraid to die. Dying's okay." And to me, to hear those words come out of my mouth was one of the most wonderful moments of my life. And I think that everybody deserves that. Like, I think that's why we're here today, even having this conversation, is everyone deserves to feel that way. And I don't think I ever want to stop doing this work until more people have that opportunity.
Thank you so much. I felt
Thanks
so
for
good to
asking.
hear. Yeah, no, it felt, fed me. It was such a good share, and I feel lit up by it. And I think your response at the end of like everybody needs to be able or deserves to have the accessibility is fairly common of anybody that has some either breakthrough or freedom experience. I've seen it a lot in the people I've worked with, and they're like, wow, I keep talking about psychedelics everywhere I go. And there's a sense of like, I found the gospel, which means like good news. And I think that is that when I had my experience at 18, it's just like, definitely I wanted everybody in the world to do this. Hence was like, it's like 70-80% of the reason I went and got trained to go do this. Just like when you see a really good movie, you want to share it, of a beautiful piece of art, or there's an amazing experience or food, right? And this is that, but like octaves higher. I'm like, here's the experience of grace, beauty, love, oneness, lights, like freedom, relaxation, love. Like, I think it's our nature to want to share those experiences with other people.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that the ability to share it on a platform with your friends in community, I find so many people sometimes hesitant to share it. And my hope is that this community integration, talking about it, becomes more commonality, more day to day, where people just kind of bring it up in conversation. And I think, to your point, a major hindrance to that is that people can't talk about it sometimes because of their job. It's illegal, and it stops part of that natural integration that a lot of the Indigenous and Native communities have. And I think that's such a bummer here. So my hope is that that changes soon.
Totally. I mean, I'm having more hope than ever before. And the truth, it's been changing a lot faster than I think almost any of us thought was going to happen. Like Denver really leading the way a few years ago in the decriminalization of psilocybin, kind of, let me say, created a punctured a hole. There was an opening that I think a lot of the people throughout the US was like, that can happen. And then a month later, we did it in Oakland, and it was completely influenced by the Denver. Like, they did that. Let's just give it a shot.
Right.
And then it passed. And now it's like decriminalization sweeping throughout the country. It's happened in many cities, and now full legalization. In terms of in research, it's just been ramping up more and more. Institutions researching psychedelics, more retreat centers, more openings. I hear just more trainings nonstop. I mean, if this is a curve just from 5 years ago, it's really slanted. Like, there's a massive acceleration in interest and acceptance, where it's been years since I've heard an opposition to psychedelics. Like, I don't think there is none, in terms of even Michael Pollan, when he wrote his book, it's big for him to come out in 2018 with How to Change Your Mind, being like, I'm going to put this work out there on psychedelics. I'm expecting psychiatrists, lawmakers, people to come after me. And he's like, I didn't find any. Like, we know the system's not working. Therapists know what they're doing isn't as as effective as they want. We know all the antidepressants aren't working. There's a lot of people with PTSD. The veterans are suffering. We know there's a major, mental health issue. And if this is working, we're all on board. Everybody just wants it done safely. So it's about just education, spreading awareness right now. I think it's like one of the best things we can do, having those conversations. And as long as we do everything, when I say carefully, it's like full of care, like thought out, it's wanting to happen. There's no enemy or opposition. And I think that's really nice for us to hold.
That makes my heart really happy. And these conversations make my heart really happy. Michael Pollan's book did change my mind. That was, I think, as so many people, that was the book that kind of told me, like, you can have a guide. You can have somebody that can sit there with you on a high dose experience and provide a safe setting and facilitate that. And to me, that was like, whoa, that can happen. I'm not just at a concert with my friends. And that kind of is what for me, spurred a new path of plant medicine and deep reverence as opposed to just recreational use. So to that,
Totally.
Michael Pollan, like major kudos. I hope he does that
So
for all kinds of people.
I think he has. There
Yeah.
has, at least the year it came out, like half the people I was meeting in different psychedelic circles came because they read his book. So I
Yeah.
think more than anything in the last 2 decades, he has been the person that really has amplified, like with a megaphone,
Right.
awareness of psychedelics, I think the most. So
Yeah, which is amazing. When I think
uh,
about his book too, and I'm curious to get your take on this, oftentimes we hear conversations in the psychedelic space of, I need to deeply heal. There's trauma, there's collective trauma. So healing on a personal or collective level. And when I think about Michael Pollan's book, he did healing. I think he did a lot of mind exploration. It was for a journalistic perspective. So, what's your
mm,
take? Because you lead retreats in Jamaica and have done what I assume to be quite a few ceremonies. What is your take on when people explore the psychedelic space from the perspective of, I'm coming because I need to heal versus I'm coming because I'm just curious and I want to
mm,
explore my mind? Do you feel like
mm.
entheogens meet people differently in that sense?
Oh, no, 100%. And they meet you differently every time you take them,
Mhm.
moment to moment, experience to experience for the rest of your life, meaning they always help us keep evolving, deepening, healing, and expanding. It seems, especially something like mushrooms, it's infinite.
Mhm.
About 90% of the people I've seen or work with come in because they're suffering to some degree, pain. Almost all the time, it's a combination of depression and anxiety. And so that's why the most the people come in, and the first few experiences are really focused on healing because they're in pain, they're in acute pain. And most of them have been doing therapy for years. They've done all the medications, they've done all the conventional routes before they're willing to try something so alternative. But they keep coming back for the growth. Like there comes major times, a lot of times after just 1 or 2 sessions with the prep and integration, going deeply in, drastic differences, and you see it over months. Like if they do one journey and then another journey a few months later, they see dramatic change, and then you see them again a few months later. Um, Again, the trajectory of life also accelerated. They're better, the relationships, better themselves, better with the work, better with their children. All around self-esteem is going up, greater sense of well-being. It's amazing, and they continue. And I think they will continue lifelong because they continue to see this experience of growth and awareness. That being said, there is that like 10% that come in just for growth and awareness, whether it's intellectual curiosity and so on. And I think we have different personality dispositions, whether it's like the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs. There's some of us are more pulled towards feeling, some of us more towards thinking, some of us are more athletic in our bodies. And so we're going to come in with our, unique personality and disposition. So some people really focus on the intellect, and either they're disconnected from their emotional life or their emotional life is fine. It's just not their priority. But
Yeah.
a lot of times they have the experience to feel deeper feelings that they don't have access to during these psychedelic states that really reorganizes their entire being, including making them more available for intimate relationships with everybody around them.
Which is kind of what we're here for, is to experience the people, the love, the intimate relationships. Man, I was such a loner before I started really diving into the space more. I thought I could do it all by myself. I don't really need too many people, just a couple friends is fine. And I don't know what happened. It must be the mushrooms or the mycelium, but all of a sudden, all these amazing humans started to propagate into my life. And I'm like, where'd you come
Mm.
from? What's up with this introduction? And I just think that that's a product of kind of communing with the plant. It's almost like we share that.
I love it. It reminds me of a famous quote, I think said both by Terence McKenna and Timothy Leary, is find the others, because you have these huge
Yes.
experiences. You want to find it's just like there's a sense of we all want to be around each other. And that's why something like the festival seems amazing, where there's a visionary
Yeah.
art, music inspired by psychedelics, and you have the sense of a tribalness of a tribe. For most of the people in some of these transformative festivals, they're like, there's this feeling of like we've had similar psychedelic experiences because the insights tend to be the same,
Yes.
across the psychedelics, very similar to the same ones that people get in meditation and mysticism. There's a sense of kind of oneness that you get clued into, and it
Hmm.
comes with its ethics and kind of lifestyle. So I think there is a draw to bond with a like-minded community, and it's, I think, even more real when it's like has this kind of open-heartedness and even kind of spiritual, layer to it.
I think
Yeah.
it's beautiful. I love transformational festivals. I haven't yet had the opportunity to go to Burning Man. was going to go last year and then it just didn't pan out. But to me, that's like the mecca of where the culmination of true human imagination exists. Like anything is possible. And I was reflecting on this earlier today, to your point, when you get kind of these more curated experiences, it's almost like the universe is watching its own hive mind. Like if the psychedelic experience is the universe, say, experiencing itself a little bit, or we're experiencing our own love and our own self, and then we're kind of looking outward at that, it's like the universe and us is watching like its ultimate creation and hive mind happening. And I'm just like, that's such a parallel mirror experience that's so unique. I love it.
I love it too. You know, I've lived a life that I don't think is for everybody. You know, I haven't had hundreds of journeys. You know, like I'm pulled towards just keep exploration, deepening, and teaching. So I don't recommend, you know, what I'm going to say next. But I had a day where I was journeying 5 days straight, and I was just focused on this question of why does the universe exist? And I'm like, I know it's connection love, but like, there's a part of me that really wanted to understand it deeper. And then 5 days in, there's this huge opening where, you know, seeing the Big Bang kind of unfold, and then the massive kind of flowering of all the like the, you know, planetary systems, the biological, that just keeps flowering and flowering, and it keeps changing into new novel forms. And it really kind of landed that a huge part of the universe is beauty. Like it's here to put on this massive play. Yes. And that play wants to be enjoyed and seen. It's like this nonstop show that keeps evolving in complexity forever. And it wants to leave you in awe. Like it wants to be seen.
I'm so with you. I'm smiling right now because your experience is so beautiful. And I went hiking this summer, and I hiked some 13ers, which are mountains over 13,000 feet in Colorado. And I just remember sitting at the peak of one and looking out onto all these other mountains, which there's countless of them here in Colorado. And I was just crying because I was thinking to myself, A, one day I'm not going to be here to look at this anymore. And that kind of sucks. But B, like this is put here for us to look at, whether it's on this planet or in the cosmos, in our journeys, like you said. It's this beauty that's here to gaze upon. And I'm just like, can't get enough. I can't eat it up enough. It's like nature, it never stops ceasing to amaze.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's because at our nature, there is this deep mystery. You know, there's this awesome creativity that doesn't end, and that wants to keep coming through. So it's going to amaze you because that's a part of our essence, you know, and it gets to feed you. You're like, I can't eat it up enough. It's pleasurable. You know, it's just like if I imagine a kind of heightened ecstasy state, even with the Hindu tradition, you know, they think our true nature is, I think it's called Ananda. Something that means our true nature is bliss. That's what we are underneath it. So they're love. And a huge part of that is beauty. You are also beauty watching itself. So yes, I think the reason nature has so many forms, if you look at different flowers, their geometric shapes, their colors, all these things, it's not just about survival. It's not. You can walk around and see it. It wants to be beautiful. It wants to show its form.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's amazing. And that journey sounds incredible, which kind of makes me think 5-day journey. That's intense. You saw some beautiful things. And part of what we're doing right now is also integration. Talking about it is part of integration. Yeah. So when you had a type of experience like that, or just any experience in general, I even think we can apply this to microdosing. How do you approach integration?
Yeah. You know, it's twofold in the sense of like, there's a way I personally do for myself, and then there's like what I'd recommend to others. And the difference being is because it's my natural disposition, you know, like in the Myers-Briggs, I'm an INFP, introverted, intuitive, feeling, perceiving. Enneagram, a type 4, which is really focused on their self and self-growth. And so it's almost a priority. It's where my system naturally moves towards, is to digest and make sense of my experience and to feel deeply, right? There isn't a day in 20 years that I haven't been thinking about my psychedelic experiences, right? I'm constantly chewing on them, getting a lot out of them. I haven't worked with lots of people. I know that's not most people's or a lot of people's natural functions. There's just sometimes it's extroversion, you know, or focus on productivity and work. And they have so many other things, and that's all beautiful. We need all of them. And so I think for most people, I think the really healthy route is to schedule days for integration. So, you know, if we do something like an Atman, it's like you have a follow-up call, like a 50-minute call a week later, and then another one about a week after that. Because the whole point we're approaching is deep transformation, not just the beautiful experience, which it is, but we want it to make structural changes in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the way you learn and get ready for tests, the more you go through the information and sit with it, the more it has a chance to deepen and change you. So not just integration right after, but even another 1 week or even a month out to come back and spend an hour, 50 minutes, an hour to revisit and go through the entire experience again, I've seen to be very helpful.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely different for everybody. And one question that I also get asked is, and I asked this myself at one point, it was, how do you know your integration is done? And I'm curious what your take is, but the answer that was given to me was, it's never done. And integration and preparation intertwine. It's like 360 degrees of never ending. You're integrating to prepare for whatever is next, and then you're always preparing to integrate. But how can somebody who's maybe newer to the space try to understand a little bit about when integration has been sufficient and when they might be ready for another experience?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So if somebody was able to take notes for you during that journey or you've recorded it, I mean, it's so helpful, because just like everything that happens in life, you're likely not going to remember a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
The changes are there and the impressions are there, so it'll change you, but we want to bring it to your conscious awareness, right? And so it's awesome if you have notes that you can come back to later, or record and you can come back to later. And I think a good gauge is when you review the material, is there any charge to any of the material? Meaning, is there any aliveness when you feel into it? Is there any emotions that come up, sadness, fear, shame, or happiness or bliss? And if it feels like an emotional charge, stay with that and keep going towards it. So I think a good way just generally to live is just follow aliveness and charge.
Mm-hmm.
There's been journeys I have, where there was a sense of completion within the journey. There was nothing to integrate later. I think a good way to frame psychedelics is, a lot of times psychedelics themselves are integration. They're like, we're integrating our biography. We're integrating what happened in childhood. We're integrating what happened today and last year. We see all the information that we couldn't pick up while we were going through it. So a lot of integration actually happens, like that's what we're doing. It's like integrating trauma, where it happens in the journey. But while we're integrating things, like there's this missing puzzle piece comes in. Now we have an emotional response to that we need to integrate. So sometimes, there's journeys where I'm like, wow, I'm complete in the journey. And there's other times I'm like, I just got fed a whole bunch of information, even if it's from my past. Now I have to sit time to process and even integrate. It's like taking a piece, bringing it into you and making it a part to establish wholeness. It's like you want it to become this experience, digest it so it becomes a part of your being.
Yeah, I agree. And I hear you using a lot of the parts language, which I'm familiar with from internal family systems. There's a part of me that's mad. There's a part of me that's a little child. There's a part of me that's happy. Do you find that there's like one particular modality, such as wholeness, internal family systems, that works for integration? Is that what you're referring to as well?
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely has gone through so many models and systems that I pull from all of them, but there's they all there because we're looking at the same psyche. So it's different languages and facets of looking to the same structure, to the same being. I think the part that stands out the most, that comes in almost everybody's work, if they have access towards it, is that of the inner child. It's where most of the trauma happens. It's like the emotional part. It's not just early childhood, but it's that part that feels needy or anxious or scared or feels shame. It's the emotional part. If it's not integrated with us, we feel not belonging or abandoned. It's hard to have a whole system, including our emotional life, on board if this part isn't integrated. So we have to learn how to reparent ourselves, read how to hold ourselves, how to bring love, nurture into this part that maybe didn't get it. So that's like, and the aspect that works for that is like an inner parent. Like, how do I become a solid adult that gets to reparent this part that perhaps for most of us didn't get ideal parenting?
Right.
So even though there's a large complexity of parts, I feel like these are like the two large universal parts that a lot of people come in and need to work with. It's like where they find stability and solidness and become like more fully functioning human beings, is by working with these two parts. What I have seen is where because we all go through like a lot of hard events. It's just a part of human life. But where I feel like the deep trauma actually happens is when it begins to shape our sense of identity. So something happened, like your parents weren't there for you, so you feel like you're not enough, or you felt abandoned, or you were shamed or rejected, or you experienced massive guilt at some point, so you feel like you walk around guilty. So what I've seen is the sense of self is what influences your life more than anybody else. As I mentioned, most of the people I've worked with have come in for depression. And fairly quickly, I was able to see just this common characteristic that runs through them, which is a low self-esteem. There's an inefficient or inadequate sense of self. I feel like I'm not enough. And if you're being a being that you don't like because they don't like themselves at some core level, then life is painful. If you're forced to be in a situation, nonetheless an actual character that you don't like, life is inherently depressing. What they're doing is beating down that inner child. They're judging that inner child. It's like telling a little kid, I don't like you, you're not good enough, but they're doing it inside all day. So of course they want to commit suicide or just not be in this world, or they don't feel available to show up for connections. They're feeling shame, you can't. So much is restructuring that identity, because the truth, it was all an illusion. Like they just got fed this idea of this identity by their parents, by schoolmates, by society. It's not who they really are. But this belief stuck in at a really long age. Decades have come by, so they've created this, character around it. And so much of it is dissolving. You could say the default mode network, which is overly done in people that are anxious or depressed, and kind of creates a hyper-connected brain state. So these rest of the parts of themselves kind of come back online. So much of the deep work is actually working on identity, that I'm loved, that I'm happy, that I'm okay, that I'm whole, that I'm precious, that I have value. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy, so much is like we need a good sense of self-esteem before we self-actualize. So whether people know or not, they're coming in partly for working on self-esteem.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And I can really resonate with, the depressed, anxious, at one point suicidal, on SSRIs. It's a hard state to come out of. It's a hard state to come out of because sometimes you don't know anything else because you've been like that for so long. And, I can attest, years of therapy sometimes cannot do it. You can have the best therapist ever, and a single psilocybin experience can be like 10 years of therapy, connects all the dots in a 4-hour session. And it's really beautiful. And you can do that with breath work, all kinds of things. So I resonate with that. And yeah, I hope we can move forward in a way that allows people to integrate even the therapy that they have.
No, I love that. No, thanks for saying that. I've heard that sometimes this was like 10 or 20 years of therapy, but what I've seen in myself and then, reflected back to people I've seen, it's like, I don't even think 10 or 20 years of therapy can get to this, as you were kind of sharing.
I agree.
Because it's happening at such a deep structural level that it's below our level of language and awareness. It's at the deep somatic level. It's a deep level of this identity that we're hard to even grasp. It's part of this infant self that we don't have access to. And so what is sad is, like, if we don't integrate this kind of modality, I think there's a large portion of mental illness, meaning there's emotional pain and stuff that just won't be able to otherwise be healing without this modality.
So we do all of this work, some of us, we do all this work while we're here on this planet. A lot of it's integrating parts of ourselves. It's self-actualizing as long as certain needs are met. So I like to ask people this that are in the space, like, where do you think we go when we die? What happens when our physical body no longer serves us here?
I love it. It's definitely come up a lot in journeys, but there's a specific one that comes up, and it was my first Burning Man. I took some mushrooms, and as soon as it was coming on, I'm like, I have to get to the temple. I don't know why, but I have to get there.
Yeah.
Got in, dropped down, laid down, and had this, I'm going to say beautiful and painful, but amazingly transformative, like 2.5 hour, just deep journey. And what I felt like I was being shown, or the way I at least made sense of it, is it said the day we die is the happiest day of our lives. It is by far, it's this amazing, joyous celebration. We come back to who we are before we were born, which is eternal, right? And we're coming to be back by integrating into this larger system, this oneness. And it's as if, like, one of the best metaphors I have, it's like as if our consciousness dies, but then we dissolve into the internet and interconnect back with everything. And we're still individual selves, but then in that coming back, the whole internet kind of celebrates us. They're like, hey, welcome home, family. Like, welcome. This is another piece of me that's coming back in line. And it was like absolute bliss to be in that state. And so we don't lose our sense of self. We don't lose our connection to anybody else. That actually all increases. The human experience was actually one more of separation, which we're creating this beautiful kind of space. just kind of thinking of why that separation exists. It's like if everything is light, why do we have darkness? So we can see form. It's the space in between the light that gives shape to all these forms, right? So we're experiencing separation so we can have like these deep personal relationships while we're here, but we move back into this unity, even though we still have our individuality back. So, it's in this sense, is like even when your parents die, when you die, when all of it, like it's almost as if we go back into the insides of everything, of every atom, of every tree. We'll have access to even far more, when we dissolve, this body dissolves and we come back into the all.
You introduced me to this book, and I can't talk about it enough. LSD and the Mind of the Universe by Christopher Bache. Still my favorite book to this day. And he talks about in one of his later LSD experiences, kind of just, he said, all of my experiences were preparing me to see this. And it was the earth and the ocean and all kinds of things just absorbing and regurgitating and remaking humanity and then clearing everything away over and over again in what was basically like the blip of time. Like we have no idea how small we are. And I think he equated it to this whole process. And a lot of what he goes through in his experiences was purification. And so sometimes, to your point, I think like we're put on this earth to make these connections, maybe work through some of our traumas, make the earth and universe a little bit more whole, more pure, and then return back to the cosmic intelligence to reap and sow those benefits, which is ultimately what I think of as pure and whole. And so it's kind of like this rinse and repeat process of just experience. And I really resonate with what you said, and it sounded absolutely amazing.
No, I mean, I love what you just shared too, and I really resonate. And I think a good visual that goes to it is like the spiral. So it's not like we're just going back and doing the same thing over, but it grows and develops every time.
Yes.
So you come back to the same cycle again, but you have the awareness of everything before, so you keep expanding.
Yes.
As far as I can tell, that just keeps happening forever. So.
Forever. Forever. Has it always been happening? We don't know.
That's a sense. At least if we look at science, it's like 13.8 billion years, but we don't know. It could go way before that. And as you shared, it's like when we look at the time scales, we're such a bleep that like for us, it's forever makes more sense. We're talking about billions of years or much, much more,
And who knows where this universe is on the grand scale? This is just one universe. Who knows? We could have many universes before this that was all doing the same thing. We literally have no idea.
But the best I got is, and I think the Hindu tradition got this right, that we're part of a very large mind, and their tradition is everything's Brahman and he's having a dream. As I was, shared as I was a physics major for a while. And so really looking at things from that lens, even when we look at an atom, it's 99.9% empty space, right? Like all we're seeing as far as empty space. And then we just see light reflecting off of that. And even that small empty space is almost space itself. That's there. What I've gotten to is like, this is just one large imagination. This is a large collective dream, and that's what we are. And so if we approach this level as like we're this large dream in this being, anything can happen. Time is fairly infinite. We can do anything. I mean, the endless creativity of form is just going to continue exponentially for eternity.
Yeah, it's kind of, like a while ago we dreamt of Star Trek and all the sci-fi stuff, and here it is kind of playing out in real time. So anything's possible. I have a couple more questions for you before we wrap up. Who is one of your role models, past and present?
I guess a couple minds come up that are more relevant. The one that's played maybe the largest role was Maynard James Keenan, the lead singer of Tool. We shared about that experience, but as a teen, somebody that really, with strength and vulnerability, brought so much to the table, including integrating masculine and feminine to a deep sense of mysticism, to talking about psychedelics. And he had entire songs about shadow work and Jung, and it was just like, and done with that level of passion has fed me for 20 years. And so it was incredible. I got to have dinner with him about 5 years ago, and it felt like, again, this huge synchronicity of like, how is this happening? And it was a 5-course meal at a vegan restaurant, and every plate was mushroom themed, and paired with his wine. And no, I know it's ridiculous. And with the mushroom expert there talking about each mushroom that's in the meal, he gets up and talks his wine. I'm like 3 feet away from him for 3 hours. And it felt like this kind of like, because he's so hard to approach, he kind of pulls back from the rest of society. So it was definitely, again, like, this is such a weird, intelligent, this couldn't have happened on random.
Right.
being able to have this. And I got to tell him, like, dude, I went to your concert, took mushrooms, changed my life. Like, it was
Okay. So
incredible to be able to share this aloud.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it
you
took me
shared
like
with
through
him.
half the meal and I was like shaking, but like I got to. And so aside from him, which has been amazing, the next one would probably be Terrence McKenna.
Hmm.
Probably listen to 200 hours of his talks, and having studied philosophy for so long, my master's and the bachelors and doctors, and really focusing of all the great thinkers, mostly within the Western tradition, but there's so much more just beyond that. I feel he outdoes them. Yeah, I feel he was more novel, so much new, synthesized more information, so creative, like it's so much more inspiring. Like, I'm like, he fucking, I think he's going to sit on his own level for a long time of what he's done. And what I think for generations, we're going to be pulling from him. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I am so happy that you got to share your experience at
Yeah.
that dinner. Like, what are the odds? That's
That's
incredible.
what I walked out there. I'm like, okay, God exists. Like, it was just so unreal
Yes.
to be able to have this experience. Yeah.
Reaffirmed God exists.
Yeah.
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 Oh,
Yeah.
that's so wonderful.
Mm.
Okay, so if we talked a lot about younger selves, part work, inner child, if you today could go back or right now give any information or advice to
Mm.
your younger self, what would you say to little Jahan?
What comes up for me is that I'm wondering how much of a difference it would actually make, because I could definitely be like, hey, you're enough. I love you. You're safe. It's going to turn out okay. But I think the truth is there would have been such a nourishment barrier, which I think is a very
Mhm.
helpful concept, because if you don't feel it like you're enough and things haven't gone that way, like there's an inability to receive love that I think most people have. And we're constantly like, just that we can develop in our capacity to hold more and more pain and more everything. We have to develop our capacity to hold more and more love and more pleasure.
Yeah.
So if I went back and even said the perfect thing to him,
Yeah.
I don't know if he would believe it,
Right. Might
because
not
it
be
wasn't
ready.
being mirrored in the environment. Yeah, it wasn't mirrored in the environment. There wouldn't be space for the integration. It's not like, it's like what he would need is like this awesome buddy that's with him all the time, helping to
Yeah.
mirror back and helping him grow in the deep sense of connection that just wasn't there. There's just this deep sense of isolation and aloneness, which led to
Mhm.
shame and deep depression, right? And so what he needed was just connection,
Mm.
a beautiful, healthy sense of a deep connection. And so I don't know if it's a word, but like maybe a deep hug and affirmation at the right moment. Like what he needed
Yeah.
was just a level of contact. Because at some deep level, this oneness, if we're going to call it, is in us kind of feeding us intuition our whole lives.
Yeah.
And so how much times have we gone through life that there's this deep sense and intuitive vision of like, everything's actually okay.
Mm.
And then something hard happens, a few months later, and you completely lose it and freak out, right? Like, so it's just like, we were always being guided, you could say, by a deeper self.
Mhm.
It's just like our ability to listen to it and to trust it and deepen with it. I think that's the capacity that keeps growing. So I don't know if information would have done it. He just definitely, yeah, needed to have some more needs met. And I think there were more emotional needs that needed to be met. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
resonate with that. I think as children, we, to your point from the initial part of the conversation, it's asking for what you want. It's, what do I want? What do I want now? What do I
Mm.
want in life? What do I want tomorrow? I think as children,
Mm.
we don't know that. We're kind of told what we want, or we're given
Yeah.
what other people think we need. And so it's really
Yeah.
coming into being able to ask ourselves and be really honest with ourselves. What do I want? And, lately for
Yeah.
me, it's like the old wise woman coming in and saying, like, this is what I think you want. How does this feel? And it's that elder knowledge that I'm trying to draw upon to kind of guide me, because some days we don't
Oh,
know. We don't know what we want. And I think that that can be really
totally.
difficult. Even today, it doesn't matter if we're a kid or now. Do we always know what we
Yeah.
want? Do you think we
Yeah.
always know what we want?
No, I don't. I don't. But that's why I think it's helpful to ask, because
Yeah.
it's not on our mind. So I think asking ourselves, keeping that awareness is great than asking each other. It's like when I ask my clients, I know there's a 90% chance they're just going to freeze and not know what to say.
Mhm.
But I'm going to ask them anyways because nobody has asked them. I want to introduce this thought in their mind to constantly be reflecting, because we don't know what to organize our time and our energy around, instead of all the things that we should do or have to do. And we could spend an entire life just doing the shoulds and have tos and maintenance of life, and
Yeah.
really missing trying to find the way to make our heart really happy.
Yeah.
So then asking inside, what's your deep desire and want? And then so we can carve out or place a deep portion of our attention and energy of moving towards that.
When people come into the space and say that they're new to the space, like if someone's interested in exploring more of the psychedelic experience, what advice would you give them coming in here?
What I try to constellate within them is this deep sense of we are love and everything's okay. And so I would try to, as every chance I have, to be with anybody to help them deepen into that experience, right? So it's primarily the stuff that gets in the way is fear. So like help them to feel safe. So if it's somebody coming in the journey in the first time, is do all the things that you need to feel safe so you can let go.
Yeah.
I think if just to make it could be hard for some people to sit with, but like come in as if you're coming to your funeral, like you're gonna die. You're coming into a death ritual and you're gonna die. Right? So, and hopefully they know these substances are completely safe, right? You're not actually gonna die, but come in as if that's what you were gonna go do, willingly to go meet your death. What do you need to do in your life to feel complete and in integrity? Is there conversations that you were supposed to have with your parents, with partners? The people that you love, do they know? Is there things you need to confess or get out? Is there shame built up? Is there things that you need to like complete so you can be at peace? Right? Because there might come the opportunity in the journey where you have this chance to really let go, which is we really find freedom. And to be honest, it's a big request. I mean, a lot of times people come to this moment where they want to surrender and they can't because they've been clinging on to life for so long, for decades. And it's a big thing with like, oh, within an hour, give everything up. Right. And a lot of times when they come back the second or third time, they can do it because they had that. And then over the next few months, they've done so much work that now they can, and I think part of the work is like, how can we surrender moment to moment to moment in life? It's just really amplified in these psychedelic states. So, we'll do everything that you need to do so you can surrender in a very authentic way.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think it's the trust of like, okay, I've done it once. I survived. I got so much out of it. Now what? Now I get to do it again and again. And I think that that's really important. And to your point, I think a large part of it, and what I realized in my own psychedelic experiences, especially the first one, was just an immense amount of love and self-love. So I guess my last question to you is, what is so great about being Jahan, and what do you love about yourself today?
Oh, such a beautiful question. Thank you. I think the answer will continue to expand and, develop for the rest of my life, which I hope so. The older I get, I do love myself more. I see myself more. I'm so much more grateful. The first 18 years were fucking painful and hard, right? So it's been, again, like a graph of like, as I keep getting older, there is more self-love and awareness that I like being. But, if you asked me 10 years ago or 20 years ago, anytime before, even after I had the experience, there's all these breakthroughs, but I'm like having to let go all the deconditioning I built up so far in my life. And then on top of that, there's all this intergenerational trauma that's just built into your body that you're letting go of. So it's a lot. But what I like, I feel I have a very unique life and I'm a very unique individual. And so that I think we're all special, we're all unique, but I feel that part's really constellated inside. I'm very happy with the way I've lived my life. I feel deep in integrity. I feel really committed to the good things. I spent so much time focused on learning and loving. So I feel like I've really have showed up to get the most out of it. I've been, even there was this experience I had 3 days before that breakthrough when I was 18. And even though I was an atheist, I was in a lot of pain. And I went out to the desert and started screaming at the sky, and I was talking to God, which at that point I thought I was an atheist, didn't exist. But I was like, I'm going to be the best person I can be for me and not for you. Like, I don't need anybody external. I had gone through so much pain in this life that it has to end with me. I cannot I don't want to push this life pain onto anybody else. And, I'd already been sitting in kind of suicidal state for a long time. I was like, what's the next 80 years compared to, eternity, like instead of killing myself now, what if I'm just as helpful I could be to alleviate pain until I die? So I kind of made that kind of commitment of how to live my life. And then a few days later, there was this huge breakthrough that changed things, so like that commitment still feels there, where I feel like I've done as much as I can during this life to be helpful, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah. And I feel very creative. That's like, as for in the Enneagram, there's just a deep wellspring of like regeneration of death and rebirth in my vein.
Thank
Wow.
you for
Oh,
sharing that. And I think that you
yeah.
still have a lot more to contribute. Like I could reread your book 100 times and feel like I get a new nugget out of it. And this conversation has been energizing. I feel grateful to be in
Mm,
community with you and to know you.
mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a blessing. Thank you for
It's
sharing that.
mutual.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Hannah. Likewise.
So,
Pleasure.
what's next for you?
Been doing and helping in a variety of different trainings. I mentioned content advisor and effort synthesis, but I also just taught a workshop on them for on the intersection of sex and psychedelics.
Mhm.
I'll be teaching a workshop on that for another psychedelic integration training next week. I've been doing the whole podcast thing. My friend Seth, he's has a contract to publish a book on the cultivation of psilocybin mushrooms. I'm writing like a 5-page, like 2 to 5 page introduction for the book, like
Mhm.
opening. Work's going amazing. So I'll be going back to Jamaica in March,
Nice.
and
Cool.
yeah. And I definitely have a few more books to write. And but one's giving myself space after so long of focusing on that.
Good.
I think the next title is going to be I've been sitting with it for a few years. I've already done a lot of work of organizing it, but wanted to constellate is Psychedelic America.
Ooh.
Part of it, autobiographical, but then also autobiographical about our country and its relationship to psychedelics, and the same kind of like structure I did with my book of present, past, and future will probably be right. So the present day of psychedelics. And so a lot of it will have to be done that writing in 2023 because I really want to capture what happens then in that first year of psychedelics being integrated into culture. Right. I
Ah,
want to see how many
yeah.
clinics open up, how the public receives it, all that. So it's again, it's kind of reflecting the country back to itself, but from the lens of psychedelics. So a
Amazing.
lot of the beginning part of the book will be that. And then some of the history since the 60s has been written about a lot, but I'll definitely have to put it in. And then I want to do a portion of the deep history. Like, a lot of us know about 20,000 years ago, a lot of people migrated here to North, Central, and South America. Huge psychedelic culture. There's probably at least 60 million people by the 1500s. And we know so many tribes, including one that sends out the Aztecs, because once the clergy came from the Europeans to see the conquistadors, they wrote of all this major mushroom use going on. And
Mm-hmm.
it was eradicated. There's just ethnocide in human history. And so I really want to ground that psychedelics are deeply American. I think we have more, my awareness or impression, we have more psychedelics in the Western hemisphere than the rest of the world, and
Mm-hmm.
so we're just coming into awareness about it in terms of a Western culture, but we have a lot to learn from the indigenous civilizations that were largely wiped out. I mean, the Mayans and Aztecs had amazing cosmology, deep rituals, working with the medicines for millennia. And
Yeah.
because there was a largest ethnocide, it's like we have amnesia. That entire huge part of humanity is left out of history. And for me, it's one of the most amazing because even though there's great stuff with Hinduism and Buddhism and everything that happened in the Western world, these people actually focus on psychedelic states. So they've learned so much, and I think we need to integrate that. And then after that past part is done, I want to do more speculations on what the future could look like in the future evolution of our species after that comes with integrating psychedelics.
I am so excited for this book that I feel like must
Mm.
be, difficult to write in real time because there's just so much going on, but I'll be here to read it. And we'll
Yeah.
have to have you back on another episode to talk about the future of psychedelics and all that's happening in the decrim space.
Yeah, I'd be grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Jahan, for taking the time today.
Mm.
It's been a blessing. You're just a wealth of
Yeah.
knowledge and a beautiful human. So I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. It's such an honor, and I appreciate you too. Thank you,
Yeah,
Hannah.
absolutely.